Hi, everybody. This is Saad. I hope that you're having a good Labor Day weekend. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about the difference between critiquing an ideology and hating on individuals because they belong to a particular group or have certain traits. This shouldn't be something that I have to repeat, but the hatred is growing at such an exponential rate that it's worth reminding people of this important lesson. If, for example, you were to say, I believe that circumcisions as practiced by Muslims and Jews is wrong, and here are the reasons why I think it's wrong, that's perfectly fine. If you think there are particular tenets of any religion, take, for example, Judaism, I don't like this particular tenet in Judaism. uh, that's perfectly fine. If you say, I don't like the fact that Israel is engaging in this particular policy, whatever the policy is, that's perfectly fine. However, when that's not usually the type of uh, hate that's thrown at me, it's usually that there is something dispositional about Jews that makes them parasites, vermin, child killers, uh, robbers, thieves, uh, you know, poisonous, and so on, right? There's something inherent to them in the same way that I have green eyes, in the same way that I'm extremely sexy as a man, in the same way that there are many traits that are dispositional about me. They're part of my disposition. The people who hate Jews are making a statement about Jews as an inherent characteristic of them, and therefore they are damaged, they are diseased, they are parasites, they are vermin. That is the definition of hatred, right? If you say of any particular group, I think that all blacks, because they have dark skin, hence are black, are fill in the blank. That's what racism is. That's what bigotry is. On the other hand, when you say Islam has certain tenets that are incompatible with the West, you haven't made any statements about individual Muslims. You're not saying that Muslims have a dispositional trait that makes them, uh, pick the insult that you want. You're saying that to the extent that Muslims accept certain tenets of their religion, that could be problematic, for example, in the West, where we have personal liberties, where we accept homosexuals fully, where we think that Jews should live as equal and free citizens, where we think that any religion should be criticized if you want to forcefully. There is no blasphemy law. There is an innumerable number of tenets in Islam, which I don't need to go over here, that couldn't be any more incongruent with Western traditions. That doesn't take away from the fact that millions of Muslims don't pay attention to those parts of their religion and are perfectly lovely people, right? But when you have close to one fourth of humanity who proclaim that they are members of a religion, what would constitute the acceptable number of people who either take their religion very seriously or are willing to sit idly while others take their religion seriously, for you to wake up and say, well, there might be a problem with this particular ideology, right? The reflex of people to criticize, say, communism doesn't make someone communistic phobic, right? Communism says certain things about private property, about who can own production, about whether an economy should be centralized or not. And you can either agree with those tenets or disagree with them. And accordingly, that will determine whether you wish to have your own society infiltrated and dominated and governed by communism or not. The same applies to anything. So let's suppose, for example, that 1/4 of humanity were the most orthodox of Jews. I could very easily argue that, well, if that were the case, then the world might look very differently. It may not be uh, interchangeable with what Islam looks like if it were to rule the world. But while I can accept the fact that Hasidic Jews live a certain way, that doesn't mean that I support all of the positions that Hasidic Jews take and whether they should impose those views on others. So there isn't an iota of hatred that I hold towards individual people. Again, by virtue of being from Lebanon, by virtue of having grown up with tons of people from the Middle East, playing soccer with people that come from the Middle East, I know more people that are of the Islamic faith than most people will ever meet, and none of them have caused me any harm. But that's not what we're talking about. If Islam becomes 20% of a society, 30%, 40%, 70%, does that result in an increase in personal liberties, no change in personal liberties, or a reduction of personal liberties? So please try to find a way to recognize that the reflex of it is gauche for us to criticize someone's religious beliefs is precisely why we are currently facing the problem that we're facing in the West. It stems, as of course I have repeatedly explained in The Parasitic Mind and in my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy, those two mechanisms to first parasitize your cognitive system and then to parasitize your emotional system makes you impotent against the possibility of defending your Western values. It is really important that people wake up because it doesn't take long for us to lose the societies that we've created, which, while not perfect, is the best model of a society that the world has ever known. Take care, everybody.